The legend of Rani Lakshmibai. The winter sun of Varanasi warmed the Ghats softly on the day a young girl named Manikarnika was born to Morapantambe and Bhagirathi Bai. No one could have imagined that this child, who giggled freely and played fearlessly along the riverbanks, would one day stand as one of India's greatest symbols of courage. Even in her earliest years, locals recalled how she never feared climbing the large stone steps of the Ghats or jumping across narrow terraces. She was small, bright-eyed, and quick, always curious, always watching the world with an intensity far beyond her age. Her father worked in the court of the Peshwa in Bithor, and soon the family moved there. It was in Bithor that Manikarnika, known affectionately as Manu, grew into a young girl whose spirit was unrestrained by traditional expectations. The Peshwa, Baji Rao II, took immediate liking to her. She would accompany his adopted sons to the training grounds where they practiced swordsmanship, horseback riding, and archery. At first, the soldiers laughed, seeing a thin, small girl with playful braids attempt to mimic their moves. But day after day she practiced, often in the scorching heat, often well after the boys had left. Soon the laughter disappeared, replaced by admiration. Manu was quick, agile, and sharper than many trained boys her age. It was the early 19th century, a time when the East India Company was tightening its grip across India. Where once independent kingdoms ruled, British residents now walked freely through royal courts, influencing decisions and manipulating succession lines. But Bithur was still a warm, vibrant place for the young Manu, who had not yet felt the political storms brewing across the land. Her life changed forever at the age of 14 when she married the Maharaja of Jhansi, Gangadhar Rao. With marriage came a new name, Lakshmi Bai, and the responsibility of ruling a kingdom far bigger than anything she had ever imagined. The people of Jhansi welcomed their new queen warmly. She was young, yes, but there was a spark in her that the older advisors recognized. She was intelligent, observant, and unafraid to ask questions. While other queens stayed within palace walls, Lakshmi Bai frequently rode out on horseback through Jhansi's bustling markets and quiet outskirts, understanding her people, their fears, their needs. But fate was not kind. The couple's infant son died soon after birth. Grief struck the palace like a monsoon storm. To secure the future of Jhansi, the Maharaja adopted a child, Damodar Rao. However, not long after the adoption ceremony, the Maharaja himself fell ill. On his deathbed, he entrusted Lakshmi Bai with the protection of Jhansi and their adopted son. Soon after his passing, the British invoked the doctrine of lapse, a policy stating that if a king died without a biological heir, his kingdom would be annexed. They rejected the adopted prince and informed Lakshmi Bai that Jhansi would now belong to the East India Company. She responded with one of the most iconic declarations in Indian history, "Main apni Jhansi nahi dungi." I will not give up my Jhansi. The British assumed her resistance was symbolic. They believed she would eventually surrender authority as many princely states had done before. But Lakshmi Bai was not like other rulers. She strengthened Jhansi's military, reopened arms production units, trained women in combat, and built an atmosphere of unity among her subjects. Her palace courtyard became a ground where young girls learned to wield swords. Old warriors, long retired, returned to teach strategies of warfare. When the revolt of 1857 erupted, sparks of rebellion flashed across northern India. Sepoys rose against British officers, and civilians marched alongside warriors demanding freedom. Jhansi became a critical center of the uprising, but Lakshmi Bai's position was delicate. She wanted to protect her people from unnecessary bloodshed while ensuring that Jhansi remained free from British control. In early 1858, British troops marched towards Jhansi with a clear directive: capture the queen and take the city at any cost. The siege began brutally. Cannons thundered against Jhansi's fort walls. The ground trembled. Smoke swallowed the sky. Yet from within the fort, Lakshmi Bai led with a calm that inspired thousands. She stood atop the ramparts, fully armored, guiding her troops. She moved across the battlefield with astonishing speed. Some soldiers swore she appeared in two places at once. Her horse Badal leapt across barricades as she coordinated attacks and ensured food supplies were distributed to civilians. When the British breached one section of the fort, Lakshmi Bai made a desperate but daring decision. to escape with her young son and continue fighting from outside Jhansi. In the dead of night, with flames lighting the sky, and enemy cannon fire echoing relentlessly, she strapped Damodar to her back, mounted her horse, and leapt from the fort's ramparts. It was a jump that many thought impossible, but she made it. She escaped. What followed was a legendary journey across central India. Lakshmi Bai joined forces with Tatya Tope and other rebel leaders. Together, they captured the fortress of Gwalior, a major strategic victory that terrified the British. But the British were relentless. General Hugh Rose led an army determined to end the rebellion once and for all. The battles that followed were ferocious. Lakshmi Bai fought at the front, refusing to retreat. She inspired her soldiers by her mere presence. Her courage seemed to erase fear itself. It was during one such fierce clash near the Gwalior cantonment that Lakshmi Bai met her end. Surrounded by enemy soldiers, she fought until her sword shattered. Even then, she resisted fiercely. Historical accounts differ slightly, but most agree on one thing: she died as she had lived, with unmatched bravery, refusing to be captured. Loyal supporters quickly carried her body away and cremated her, so the British could never claim her as a trophy. Word of. Generations after her passing, the memory of Rani Lakshmi Bai continued to live in the hearts of the people of India. Stories of the young queen who rode into battle with her child tied to her back were whispered in homes, sung by wandering bards, and taught to young girls who admired her courage. But the legend of Lakshmi Bai was not built merely from the battles she fought. It was built from the life she lived, the resilience she embodied, and the inspiration she left behind. To truly understand her impact, we must look beyond the war fields and into the quieter, lesser-known moments that shaped her journey. When Lakshmi Bai had first arrived in Jhansi as a young bride, she found herself in a kingdom that was far from perfect. Years of drought had weakened its agricultural base, and political uncertainty made the trade routes unstable. Many rulers saw such challenges as obstacles, but Lakshmi Bai saw them as opportunities. She persuaded the Maharaja to invest in irrigation projects that would help farmers rely less on monsoon rains. Canals were repaired, wells were dug, and farmland that had once dried under harsh summers slowly began to thrive again. This not only strengthened Jhansi's economy, but also won Lakshmi Bai the love of her people, long before she ever stepped onto a battlefield. She also spent time in the Darbar Hall, learning from the court's scribes and advisors. She understood revenue laws, taxation processes, and the complex relationships between neighboring kingdoms. While many young queens might have left such tasks to their husbands, Lakshmi Bai believed that a ruler must understand every thread that holds a kingdom together. She often stayed up late into the night, reviewing lists of farmer complaints, merchant petitions, or matters related to security. Her compassion was as strong as her ambition. When a group of widows from a nearby village came seeking help because the local landlord had seized their property, Lakshmi Bai intervened immediately, even against the advice of senior ministers. She rode to the village herself, confronted the landlord, and returned the property to the widows. It was the first time people saw how fiercely she was willing to fight for justice. Even after she became queen, she continued her practice of horseback riding at dawn. She would gallop through the palace grounds, her long braid flying behind her, the sound of hooves echoing across the morning air. Warriors trained in the art of warfare were surprised by how skilled she was. She could ride bareback, execute sharp turns, and even fire arrows while the horse was in full motion. Over time, she trained not just herself, but also a group of young women who admired her courage. These women would later form an important part of her defensive forces when the British attacked Jhansi. As her reputation grew, so did the tensions with British officers posted in nearby regions. They were unsettled by her confidence and her independence. A young queen who took bold decisions, trained women in combat, and interfered in matters of governance was unusual in their eyes. They preferred rulers who remained politically weak, pliable, and dependent on British advice. Lakshmi Bai was none of these things. This made the British increasingly wary of her. When the Maharaja fell ill, Lakshmi Bai did everything she could to manage the functioning of the state. Physicians from distant regions were called, prayers were offered in temples, and medicinal concoctions were prepared according to ancient practices. But fate could not be changed. The news of the Maharaja's death left the entire kingdom in mourning. Yet Lakshmi Bai had no time to grieve. The British made their intentions clear within weeks. They rejected the adoption of Damodar Rao as heir and declared that Jhansi would be annexed. In the months that followed, Lakshmi Bai's defiance grew sharper. She wrote letters to British officials explaining why the doctrine of lapse should not apply to Jhansi. She argued with legal precision, pointing out historical precedents where adopted sons had inherited kingdoms. Her letters reflected not just emotion, but intelligence. But the East India Company was determined. They wanted Jhansi, not only for its fertile lands, but also for its strategic location. Meanwhile, discontent across India was rising. Indian soldiers in the British Army were increasingly frustrated with discriminatory treatment, harsh punishments, and cultural insensitivity. When the spark of rebellion erupted in 1857, it spread faster than anyone expected. Sepoys rose in Meerut, Delhi, Kanpur, and parts of Awadh. The rebellion was not a single movement, but a collection of local uprisings fueled by years of resentment. Jhansi was thrust into this storm. When rebels seized the city and killed British residents, Lakshmi Bai took control to prevent further chaos. She set up a temporary administration, protected surviving civilians, and wrote to British officials clarifying that she had no role in the uprising. But her explanations were ignored. The British saw an opportunity to paint her as a rebel leader and justify the annexation of Jhansi. By 1858, when General Hugh Rose marched toward Jhansi, the Queen was prepared. She had studied maps, designed defensive strategies, and held meetings with experienced warriors. Under her command, Jhansi's fort became a fortress of hope. People from nearby villages fled to the city seeking protection, and she ensured that food, water, and shelter were provided as best as possible. The British siege was brutal. Day after day, cannonballs exploded against the fort's walls. Dust and smoke filled the air. Children cried in fear and the elderly prayed for safety. But Lakshmi Bai never let despair take root. She walked among her people comforting them, assuring them that Jhansi would stand strong. When her soldiers were exhausted, she motivated them by fighting alongside them. When food became scarce, she reduced her own portions before allowing rations for others to be reduced. The story of her escape from Jhansi, leaping from the fort with her son tied behind her, became legendary. But the journey that followed was even more extraordinary. She and her loyal companions rode across rugged terrain, hiding in forests, crossing rivers, and outmaneuvering British patrols. Villagers along the way welcomed her with tears in their eyes, offering shelter even when they knew it was dangerous. For them, Lakshmi Bai was not just a queen. She was a symbol of resistance, an embodiment of their dreams for freedom. When she reached Kalpi, she joined forces with Tatya Tope and other rebel commanders. Together, they attempted to build a united front. They trained troops, gathered weapons, and strengthened defenses. Lakshmi Bai was always at the center of strategy discussions. Her tactical insights impressed even seasoned warriors. She had an exceptional ability to anticipate British movements and adapt quickly. Yet the odds were heavily against them. The British forces were well-equipped, disciplined, and determined to crush the rebellion entirely. Despite this, Lakshmi Bai fought tirelessly. She led assaults, supervised training, and even took charge of reorganizing supply chains. Her presence alone gave hope to thousands of fighters who felt that as long as she lived, the flame of the rebellion would never die. When Kalpi fell, Lakshmi Bai, Tatya Tope, and their soldiers retreated to Gwalior. There they captured the fort and declared it a stronghold of freedom. For a brief moment, it seemed the tide might turn. The flag of rebellion flew proudly from the fort's highest tower, but the British moved swiftly and attacked with overwhelming force. Lakshmi Bai fought her final battle with unmatched ferocity. Witnesses later recalled that she moved like lightning across the battlefield, defending her position with the determination of someone who had nothing left to lose. Even when she was mortally wounded, she refused to surrender. She died fighting for the land she loved. Her followers cremated her quickly so the British could not claim her body. Even the British acknowledged her greatness. General Hugh Rose wrote, "She was the most dangerous of all the Indian leaders." But her story did not end with her death. In fact, it truly began there. What Lakshmi Bai left behind was more than a memory. It was a movement. News of her final stand spread like the monsoon wind, touching every corner of India. Villagers repeated the tale of the queen, who tied her son to her back and rode into battle. Soldiers whispered her name before charging into combat. Even elderly men in distant provinces shed tears when they learned how bravely she had died, refusing to bow to a foreign power until her last breath. The British thought eliminating Lakshmibai would weaken the rebellion, but instead the opposite happened. Her courage ignited a new fire within people who had once lived under fear. Across central India, her followers refused to surrender. Some fought in her name, while others sang songs praising her valor. Mothers told their children stories of how a young girl from Varanasi grew into a warrior who challenged the most powerful empire in the world. It was said that even British soldiers, hardened by years of colonial warfare, spoke of her with a mix of respect and wariness, acknowledging that they had faced someone truly extraordinary. Lakshmibai's closest allies continued her struggle. Tatya Topi, her most trusted friend and fellow commander, refused to surrender even when outnumbered. For months, he led guerrilla attacks on British camps. Inspired by the promise he had made to Lakshmibai that he would continue fighting for India. Though he was eventually captured and executed, the British recognized that his unbreakable spirit had been shaped by the Queen of Jhansi herself. But resistance wasn't limited to battlefields alone. In cities, ordinary citizens protested unfair taxes. In villages, farmers refused to hand over crops to British officers. Everywhere, people found small ways to resist, each act a tribute to the Queen, who had shown them that fear was merely an illusion. Even in faraway Bengal, where news traveled slowly, intellectuals wrote essays praising Lakshmibai's bravery, calling her the embodiment of India's rising voice. The British, realizing how powerful her legacy had become, attempted to control the narrative. They released official reports depicting her as a rebellious ruler who caused unnecessary destruction. But people refused to believe these claims. They had witnessed her compassion, her dedication, and her sacrifice for them. No document, no matter how forcefully written, could erase the truth that lived in their hearts. In fact, the British attempts to defame her only strengthened her legend. Years passed, but the memory of Lakshmibai did not fade. When freedom fighters of the 20th century, like Subhas Chandra Bose, Lala Lajpat Rai, Ram Prasad Bismil, and Sarojini Naidu, rose against the British Raj, they often referenced her. Bose famously named one of his regiments the Rani of Jhansi Regiment, composed entirely of women, in tribute to the warrior queen who proved that bravery was not confined to men. But long before she became a national icon, Lakshmibai had been a young girl with dreams, fears, and hopes like anyone else. To understand her story fully, we must go back to moments that shaped the woman behind the legend. One such moment occurred during her early teens in Bithur. She had been practicing sword fighting under the guidance of a Maratha commander. At first, she struggled with balance, often losing her footing while attempting difficult moves. Her instructor advised her to rest, suggesting she might never be able to master certain techniques. But Manu was determined. She would stand alone on the training ground after everyone left, repeating the same moves again and again until they became second nature. This persistence, this refusal to give up, defined her entire life. She also had a deep love for literature. The palace library became her sanctuary. She read ancient Indian texts, stories of warrior queens, and historical accounts of empires that rose and fell. These stories shaped her understanding of leadership. She learned that a true leader is not someone who commands from comfort, but someone who stands with her people, sharing both joy and suffering. When she became queen, she carried these values with her. The people of Jhansi recall how she walked through narrow alleys during festivals, blessing newborns, speaking gently to elderly women, and ensuring merchants weren't being overtaxed. She encouraged education for girls and welcomed scholars into the palace, supporting their work. The kingdom prospered under her influence, not because she demanded loyalty, but because she earned it. During the British siege, when food supplies dwindled, she organized community kitchens in the fort. She insisted on eating only after the children and elderly were fed. She took the time to sit with families who had lost loved ones, quietly promising that their sacrifices would not be forgotten. While leading armies and planning strategies, she also remained deeply human, deeply connected to the very people she fought for. One story often shared by eyewitnesses spoke of a young soldier who panicked amid heavy cannon fire. Trembling, he attempted to flee, fearing he would not survive. Lakshmibai spotted him, rode up to him, and said in a firm but gentle voice, "Look at me. If I can face the enemy, so can you." Something in her eyes, a mixture of kindness and invincible strength, calmed him instantly. The soldier later said that he would have followed her even into death because she believed in him when he did not believe in himself. Her ability to inspire was her greatest weapon. Even in her final battle, when she fought against overwhelming odds, those who saw her remembered how her presence seemed to slow time itself. One moment she was at the front lines, sword flashing like silver lightning. The next moment she was rescuing a wounded comrade, pulling him to safety. Her courage made others brave. Soldiers who had been ready to surrender found themselves gripping their weapons tighter, determined to fight as long as she lived. After her death, the British captured Gwalior, but they could not capture her legacy. It lived in every person who had ever felt the sting of injustice. It lived in every child who grew up learning her name. It lived in every freedom fighter who took up arms to challenge colonial rule. Her story became a thread that wove itself into the fabric of India's fight for independence. In the decades that followed, India changed rapidly. Railways expanded, new political movements emerged, voices demanding freedom became louder. And through all of this, the memory of Rani Lakshmibai remained constant, a guiding light that reminded people that courage comes from conviction, not circumstance. Even today, more than a century later, her story continues to inspire millions. Statues of her stand proudly in cities, showing her on horseback, sword raised toward the sky. Schools teach her name with pride. Films, poems, songs, and books celebrate her life. The very streets of Jhansi feel alive with her spirit. Yet the most powerful tribute to her legacy is not made of stone or metal. It lies in the hearts of people who believe in fighting for what is right, no matter how impossible the odds may seem. Her story reminds us that greatness is not something one is born with. It is forged in moments of choice, when one stands up against injustice, when one speaks for those who cannot speak for themselves, when one refuses to surrender even when standing alone. Rani Lakshmibai's life was a testament to this truth. The story of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj begins in a time when the Indian subcontinent was tired, divided, and ruled by fear. Empires rose by force, survived through oppression, and collapsed under their own cruelty. The Mughal Empire dominated the north with immense wealth and military strength, while the Deccan sultanates ruled the south through alliances, betrayals, and constant warfare. Ordinary people, farmers, traders, villagers, lived crushed between taxes, forced labor, and violence. Justice was rare, dignity even rarer. It was into this world that Shivaji was born, not as a prince destined for comfort, but as a spark meant to ignite resistance. Shivaji was born on the 19th of February, 1630 at Shivneri Fort, surrounded by steep hills and guarded by stone walls that seemed to touch the sky. His father, Shahaji Bhonsle, was a skilled warrior, but also a man trapped in the politics of survival, serving different rulers to protect his family. His mother, Jijabai, was the true architect of Shivaji's destiny. She was deeply religious, disciplined, and fiercely proud of her culture. While Shahaji was often away fighting battles for others, Jijabai took full responsibility for Shivaji's upbringing. She refused to let him grow into a powerless noble serving foreign masters. From early childhood, Shivaji was raised not in luxury, but in awareness. Jijabai made him understand the pain of common people. She took him to villages, showed him ruined temples, hungry farmers, and grieving families. She told him stories from the Ramayana and Mahabharata, not as myths, but as moral lessons. Through these stories, Shivaji learned that a ruler's true strength lay in protecting the weak and standing against injustice. Slowly, the idea of Swarajya, self-rule, began forming in his mind. The rugged terrain of the Sahyadri Mountains became Shivaji's classroom. He learned how nature itself could be used as a weapon. Narrow mountain passes, dense forests, hidden caves, and high cliffs taught him movement, patience, and strategy. While Mughal generals relied on massive armies and open-field battles, Shivaji understood that intelligence and speed could defeat even the strongest enemy. He studied fort architecture, supply routes, weather patterns, and enemy behavior. Every lesson was absorbed quietly, patiently. As Shivaji grew into his teenage years, he began gathering a small group of trusted companions. They were ordinary men, farmers, shepherds, local fighters, but they believed in Shivaji's vision. Loyalty, not lineage, mattered to him. He spoke to them not as a ruler, but as one of them. Together, they planned their first bold step. At just 16 years old, Shivaji captured Torna Fort from the Bijapur Sultanate. It was a shocking act. A teenage boy had openly challenged an established empire. Soon after, Kundana and Rajgad followed. These victories were achieved with minimal bloodshed, proving Shivaji's belief that strategy could overpower brute force. With each captured fort, Shivaji's confidence grew, but so did the fear of his enemies. The Bijapur Sultanate decided to eliminate him. They sent Afzal Khan, a massive and experienced general known for his cruelty. Afzal Khan marched towards Shivaji's territory, destroying temples and villages along the way, trying to force Shivaji into surrender or rash action. Shivaji did neither. He understood Afzal Khan's mind and prepared carefully. Shivaji agreed to meet Afzal Khan at the base of Pratapgarh Fort, pretending submission. But Shivaji knew betrayal was certain. He wore hidden armor beneath his clothes and carried concealed weapons. During the meeting, Afzal Khan attempted to kill Shivaji during an embrace. In a moment that would echo through history, Shivaji struck first, killing Afzal Khan. At his signal, Maratha forces attacked the enemy camp from the hills, completely destroying Afzal Khan's army. This victory transformed Shivaji from a regional rebel into a legendary leader. People from across the Deccan began to see Shivaji as a protector. Farmers supported him, villagers hid his soldiers, and intelligence networks formed naturally. Shivaji strictly enforced discipline among his troops. Looting civilians, harming women, or insulting religion was forbidden. Soldiers who violated these rules were punished severely. This moral code set Shivaji apart from all other rulers of his time. The Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb soon took notice. Aurangzeb ruled with strict religious intolerance and absolute authority. He saw Shivaji as a dangerous challenge, not just militarily, but ideologically. Shivaji represented a ruler who fought for dignity, not domination. In 1664, Shivaji attacked Surat, one of the richest Mughal ports. The attack was swift and controlled. Shivaji ensured civilians, traders, and religious institutions were protected. European traders recorded their amazement at his discipline. Aurangzeb responded by sending Raja Jai Singh, one of his finest generals, with a massive army. Shivaji faced a difficult choice. Fighting openly would mean destruction. He chose survival. He surrendered some forts temporarily and agreed to visit Aurangzeb's court in Agra. Many believed Shivaji had surrendered. In reality, he was buying time. At Agra, Shivaji was humiliated and placed under house arrest. The Mughal court expected him to fade into history. Instead, Shivaji planned a daring escape. Feigning illness, he sent baskets of sweets out daily. One day, Shivaji and his son Sambhaji hid inside the baskets and escaped. When Aurangzeb realized the truth, Shivaji was already back in the mountains. After returning, Shivaji rebuilt his strength with greater determination. He recaptured lost forts, expanded his territory, and strengthened his navy. Shivaji understood the importance of sea power long before most Indian rulers. His naval forts along the Konkan coast protected trade routes and challenged European powers like the Portuguese. In 1674, Shivaji crowned himself Chhatrapati at Raigad Fort. This coronation was not about luxury, it was a declaration of independence. Shivaji established a structured administration with ministers handling finance, defense, justice, and foreign relations. Taxes were fair. Farmers were protected. Corruption was punished. Shivaji respected all religions and appointed Muslims to high positions, proving his fight was against oppression, not faith. Despite constant warfare, Shivaji remained accessible to his people. He listened to grievances personally and ensured justice. His leadership transformed the Maratha state into a disciplined and resilient power. Even after his death in 1680, the empire he founded continued to resist Mughal dominance. Aurangzeb spent the rest of his life fighting the Marathas, draining Mughal strength until the empire weakened permanently. Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj did not rule the largest empire, Nor did he command the biggest armies, but he changed the meaning of power. He proved that courage, intelligence, discipline, and connection to the people could reshape history. Today, centuries later, his forts still stand, his name still inspires, and his vision of Swaraj continues to live wherever freedom and dignity are valued.